Hey, Rivka Benetska, good morning. Michal Fernandez, good morning. Maya Hernandez. Lavich, good morning. Rotem, good morning. Rivka Shira, good morning. Rachel, good morning. Sofa Gula, good morning. Sofa Gula. Sarah Business, good morning. I still have to read it carefully, but at least I need to pay attention. Ariel, good morning.
Good morning.
Makovana, good morning.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Bracha Simcha,
Good morning.
good morning. Sirka. Nope.
I'm here on the Zoom.
Oh, good morning. I'm going to stand up soon. If it's there, but that's fine. Okay, who else needs to go down here? It's your last week this week. Did I hear you say that?
Every week.
As of now, okay. Just keep it up, and it can be your last week every week. That's fine. First name? Shana Schenk. Getting there. Morning. Do you want Ina? Last name?
Bodkin, the B.
B-O-D?
K-I-N.
Yep, got that part. Anyone else? No, we're all good. Okay. Okay. Whoa, that's a bit. All right, let's turn that down a bit. Okay. So, this week's parsha is. Well, let's just do all Man. Okay. So we have Parshas Vayechi this week. We're going to be talking about the brachas that Asher got, and these are true. The brachas, there's very similar. The brachas that Asher, the individual, got from Yaakov. Yes, thank you. No, it is on. I just need to hit record. Thank you. It's on. Thank you. I just flipped the screen around, so it shouldn't be too distracting. So. Not sure this should be recording too. Okay, so we're going to talk about the brachas that Asher got. And Asher refers both to Asher, the individual, who was one of the 12 sons of Yaakov. Asher is also one of the 12 tribes of the Jewish people, because the tribes are named for the sons of Yaakov, because the tribes are the families, the offspring of the 12 sons of Yaakov. So the tribes have names that are common with Yaakov's sons, because that's where they come from, that's where the names come from. And there is a resemblance, and if we look at the brachas that Asher, the individual, got from Yaakov, they're very similar to the brachas that the tribe of Asher got from Moshe Rabbeinu. So we sort of, after a long conversation here in the text about the role of Asher in the whole camp as they were traveling, and etc. We'll come back to that a little towards the end, but first we're just going to talk about the bracha itself. So we'll start off inside, we'll go outside. Are there spare copies of the Hebrew? Because the one that I prepared from is Yiddish, and that might be a little bit, weird. Okay, so we're starting from 15 where the arrow is on page 96 in the Hebrew, towards the bottom of the right column. When it comes to the reward, the blessings that Asher got, which were also a reward for their work and service, Nema b'medrash, it says in the Medrash, on our Pasha, the Pasuk says, Me Asher Shmeina Lachmei, from Asher, from the portion of Asher, Shmeina Lachmei, fat will be his bread, literally. And, fat is a sign of abundance. So the truth is, even culturally, a large period of human history being very overweight and even obese was a sign of status and of wealth, because most people couldn't afford to eat enough to not be emaciated. And when someone was obese, it meant they were eating a lot more than they needed, and that was a sign of wealth and status. So here we're not talking about fat in terms of a description of a person visually, but fat in terms of food, rich. When you talk about a food being rich, a big part of the richness of food is the fatty ingredients, fat as a macronutrient. Ingredients that are primarily built off of fatty acids, triglycerides, etc. So to say that Asher is from the portion of Asher, fat will be his bread, it's a sign of, or it's a description of abundance. And Asher's portion in Eretz Yisrael, and Asher, the tribe of Asher, was known to have tremendous abundance. But now the Midrash, as Midrash does, plays on those words. So Shmeina means fat. Or Shemen is oil. Shuman is fat. Right? Same shoresh. We have Shin Mem Nun. Shemen is oil. Shuman is fat. Shamein as an adjective is fat, or shmeina would be an adjective describing feminine, a female noun. So the female adjective would be shmeina. Must be something in the air. I was teaching another class early this morning, and we were talking about all kinds of super somber and serious things, and there was some massive laughter going on in the back of the room. No, do I need to look in the mirror? Okay, so now, as is often the case in Lashon HaKodesh, because remember, if you look in a Sefer Torah, there are no vowels. So the word Shmeina, which is the female adjective for fat or fatty, if we change that to Shmeina, we have 8. Now, 8, so if we have a look now at the Medrash and the way it's playing on those words, it says, Me Asher Shmeina Lachmei, or Shmeina Lachmei, it says from Asher, fatty will be their bread. Shehomamid big day Shmeina, that the tribe of Asher will establish big day Shmeina, the 8 garment outfit, or those who wear 8 garments. Now, anybody want to guess offhand or mention what this 8 garment outfit might likely be referring to? Kohen Gadol. Excellent. So in the Beis Hamikdash, regular Kohanim, the priests, when they would do their service in the Beis Hamikdash, they would wear the uniform or their outfit that they wore had 4 garments, and the Kohen Gadol's had 8. So it's saying that from Asher, the tribe of Asher had a high frequency of, or high prevalence of Kohanim Gedolim that came from that tribe. Rashi also says, B'Pirush in his second commentary, as a pasuk on the verse Yehi Ratzui Echav, later on, when we have another instance of the description of the blessings, etc., of Asher, the tribe of Asher, it says, Yehi Ratzui Echav, he will be desirable to his brothers. What does that mean? Rashi says, Shahoyu benoisav na'is, that his daughters were pleasant, etc. Nusuas l'kohanim gedolim, they were pleasant, they were nice, they were beautiful, and married to kohanim gedolim. Haloshim shmonim begonim, what kohanim gedolim? Those who wear 8 garments. So somehow we have this mention of Asher having, abundance represented by fat. Shmona is 8, Shmena is fat. So we have the fat is a reference to these 8 garments. And elsewhere where it says that Asher will be desirable to among his brothers, Rashi says when it says desirable, it means that the tribe's daughters will be beautiful and married to Kohanim Gedolim. So now this obviously begs the question, and we continue in the text. This doesn't sound like the kind of thing you expect to read in Rashi on a pasuk in Torah, that because their daughters were beautiful and they got married to Kohanim Gedolim. It's like, Torah isn't usually involved in the text in conversations about how pretty people are and about how Kohanim Gedolim might want to marry people because they're pretty. That being said, I just did a little bit of a misdirect. Did anybody notice what I just did? I changed adjectives from beautiful to pretty. Pretty, broadly speaking, generally refers to perhaps, let's say, a specific variety of beauty, or one of the things that the word beauty might be used to refer to. Generally, when you say someone's pretty, you're talking about the way they look. You're talking about their aesthetic beauty. Now, if you think about, sometimes when someone's describing someone, they might say, oh yeah, they're a really beautiful person. Now, when someone says they're a really beautiful person, the choice of language, and I want to talk for a minute about why, because I think why this is the choice of language might be largely subconscious, but when someone says, oh, that person's a really beautiful person, when they add the word person, what they're doing is qualifying that when they say beautiful, they're not describing the way they look, they're describing who they are as a person. That doesn't mean they're saying that they're not pretty or that they're not aesthetically beautiful. It does mean that that's not what they're describing right now. When you say, oh, that person's so beautiful, generally speaking, I think when people say beautiful without any qualifiers, most of the time they're most likely referring to the person's appearance. When you say they're a really beautiful person, you're qualifying that what you're describing now is not their appearance, the way they look, their aesthetics. You're describing who they are as a person. Now, why is it that when you say they're a beautiful person, the fact that you add the word person qualifies that you're not talking about the way they look? What are you talking about? You're talking about their character traits, their behaviors, right? The way that they carry themselves, the way they behave, the way they interact with people, their values, their practical values, their morals, etc. All of these things. Why? Because really that's what makes us the person we are, right? Who we are as a person is not defined by how we look. Who we are as a person is defined by our values. And most importantly, not the values we have in here, certainly, necessarily, because if the values that we illustrate with our hands and our feet don't match the values that we say up here. And I just want to qualify, a lot of times, I just want to qualify because it could sound like I'm accusing people of being dishonest. That's not necessarily the case at all. A lot of times, I can tell you very frankly, I'll speak about myself. If someone were to ask me my values and I would tell them what my values are, if someone were to observe me 24/7, they will notice more than one thing in my week that doesn't seem to reflect what I said my values are. Right? So are they my values? Are they not my values? It depends what you mean. Right now, the reality is we are complex, life is complex, and they could really be our values, and we really try, and we're also not perfect, and sometimes we don't live up to our values completely. sometimes you can take that a step further. There are people who tell you what their values are. And if you look at their behavior, it's not just one time in the week. It's like everything about the way they live their life doesn't reflect what they said their values are at all. That, again, doesn't necessarily mean the person was dishonest, right? A lot of times a person has certain values and things they believe in, and they're trying to live up to them. And again, reality is complex. Life is complicated. We are complicated. And what can happen is as we get involved in life and we get involved in one thing, we get involved in the other thing, those things might distract us, or we can sort of veer off the path as we get involved in things that maybe we needed to be involved in, but maybe we got a little bit too emotionally involved or too personally involved and got carried away. Practically speaking, we end up valuing things practically that we don't necessarily value up here so highly. And what we value in practice might not necessarily resemble or represent what we value up here, right? And then what we value in here is going to be somewhere in between the two, probably. But assuming there's a relatively, things are relatively consistent, the values we have in our heads, the values we feel in our hearts, and the values that we exhibit, most importantly, in our behavior, because that's ultimately what counts. If someone behaves with respectable values, someone is caring, someone is nice, someone is considerate, someone is dedicated to doing good things. If you look at that person, someone who's really exemplifies that to a high degree, it's very likely that the way you'll describe them is they are a beautiful person. Now, again, saying they're a beautiful person, adding the word person qualifies when you say beautiful, you're not talking about their looks, and it's not describing their looks one way or the other. Why? Because the way they look has nothing to do with who they are. The way they behave has everything to do with who they are as a person. So ultimately, if you're describing the person, which kind of beauty is the more relevant and real beauty, the one that actually makes more of a difference, the one that's more substantial, is being a beautiful person. So when Rashi says, and that was the misdirect, right? I translated and I said, Asher's daughters are beautiful and they married Kohanim Gedolim. And then I said, well, why would that have anything to do with being pretty? I did that intentionally to emphasize that beautiful is not talking about pretty. It's talking about being a beautiful person. Now, the question is, why would one necessarily lead to the other? And I want to go a little deep here. There's a rule, a general rule, that it's quoted a lot all over the place for a number of different reasons. And it is that Hashem behaves midah keneged midah. Right? Hashem behaves to us measure for measure, which means that, and there are many different sort of versions of this and different people will express it differently. And people will say, whatever you put out into the universe will give back to you. And then you'll have people who'll say that's fluffy, blah, blah, blah. It's whatever you do, Hashem will send it back to you. The truth is that it's both. But I want to talk about what it means when we say whatever you put out into the universe will give back to you. Because that what I think that most people think and mean when they say that probably is mostly Bodomaisis, but the statement can still be true. So the reason that Hashem gives us midah keneged midah, Hashem behaves towards us and gives us the things we deserve based on our behavior, and when we behave a certain way, we will tend to get that back. Oh, boy. Okay.
What are you doing out there? What just happened?
Sorry?
I'm just kidding.
Oh, yeah. Hashem's protecting me. When we behave the way that we're supposed to measure, or whatever we do, positive or negative, when we say that Hashem is going to give us back measure for measure, it's not just as a reward or a punishment. That's not to say that it's not a reward and punishment. It is. When we do good things, we get rewarded. When we do wrong things, we get punished. But the rewards in Torah and the punishments in Torah are first and foremost, right? The truth is that when it comes out, I think we may have talked about this in the past, in education, whether it's in a school, whether it's between parents and children, the most effective form of discipline, and I can tell you personally, for me, it took me quite a while to re-understand and understand what I think is in a far more correct way, what discipline means. Because I'm a very strong believer in firm discipline, but it took me a while to become a little bit more wise as to what discipline means. Discipline doesn't mean punishment. Discipline means enforcing boundaries, educating about boundaries, teaching someone how to behave and how to respect boundaries and how to behave responsibly, etc. To some degree, we might say that punishment is an important part of that process, but not necessarily, depending on how we look at punishments, because the punishments that are most effective are the punishments that are not actually administered as a punishment, but the natural consequences of behavior, right? So, if, let's say, for example, just a random thing, a very, very, very basic natural consequence. If a kid, right, let's say that you tell a child lives in a house, and we'll talk about living in a Brooklyn apartment, and there's radiators and steam pipes in the winter, right? And let's say that someone hasn't covered up their radiators and steam properly to make sure the kids can't touch them. They're out of the way, under the table, something. And a kid crawls under it. You see the kid's curious and they want to touch it. And you say to them, don't touch that, you'll hurt yourself. Don't touch that, you'll hurt yourself. They might listen, and depending on their age and their temperament, and kids are kids, and it could be that they're going to touch it. And you know what's going to happen when they touch it? They're going to feel pain. They're going to cry. And you know what else is going to happen? They're probably not going to touch it again. So the pain that they experienced was a natural consequence of the fact that they touched something they shouldn't touch. It's a bad idea to touch things that are very hot. If you touch things that are very hot, the natural consequence of that is you will feel pain, and that natural consequence will enforce the boundary and will teach you not to do it again. Oftentimes, and if you think about it, if a child is about to touch the radiator and you catch them right before they do it and you give them a punishment, what's going to happen? Next time you're not looking, they're going to try it again, or they're going to forget about the punishment and they're going to try it again. They touch it one time and they feel the pain, they're not going to forget that. They're going to know not to touch it again. Right? Natural consequences are generally the most effective way to learn boundaries, to learn to respect boundaries. And this is true of doing things, the natural consequences of behaving irresponsibly, as well as the natural consequences of behaving responsibly, are the most powerful reinforcers, both positive and negative, of how to behave. And a lot of the time, just not compensating and not mixing in and allowing a student or a child to experience the cost of their lack of responsibility of their negative behavior, and allowing them to feel the pain of that cost, will be the best teacher. So, and this is true generally of rewards and punishments in Torah. When a person, what's generally the big reward that we talk about the most? Gan Eden, right? Going to heaven, sitting in Gan Eden and feeling the unimaginable pleasure of basking in the glory of Hashem's divine radiance. Is that a reward? It is, kind of. First and foremost, it's the natural outcome of doing the right thing. It's a natural consequence. The natural outcome of living a life of Torah and mitzvahs is that as we learn Torah and we do mitzvahs, we connect to Hashem more and more and more. And the truth is, we already have that now. It's just that we're not in touch with it now. When the neshama leaves the body and the body's not in the way anymore, and the neshama goes to Gan Eden, it now gets to experience the divine, the pleasure of that divine radiance, which it generated for itself during its life in a body in the world with Torah and mitzvahs. So Gan Eden, first and foremost, is just the natural outcome of a life of Torah and mitzvahs. It happens to be unimaginably amazing, and it happens also to be an extremely effective reward. But it's first and foremost the natural consequence of a life of Torah mitzvahs, and it happens to also be a reward. But it's not like Hashem says, oh, you do Torah mitzvahs, I'm going to give you a reward. But you do Torah mitzvahs, Hashem obviously created things in this way, so it works out that way. But it's not Hashem giving us a candy. It's we did something, we generated something of extreme value through our life, and then that is the ultimate reward. And the same thing is with, the punishments in Torah, Gehenna, etc. Doing things that are wrong, being irresponsible, generally has negative ramifications. When we behave irresponsibly and there are negative ramifications, you know what? We have to do damage control. We have to correct the damage that was done. If I spill something on the floor, it's not a punishment that I have to clean it up. If I drop, I don't know, a glass jar of marinara sauce and it goes all over the floor, it's not a punishment that I have to clean it up. It's just like I dropped something and it made a mess and it needs to be cleaned up. And it's all the same thing. When we do when we do wrong things, there is damage that is caused. And when there is damage, when there is soiling, when something is dirtied or soiled or damaged or whatever it is, that needs to be repaired. It needs to be cleansed. It just so happens to be that the cleansing and repair process, as it often is, right? Most people probably don't enjoy cleaning marinara up off the floor. And you know what? When you drop marinara on the floor and it breaks and you have to clean it up, you have to get down on your hands and knees and clean the floor, and then you have to scrape it up and then wipe it up and then mop it, and then go and find it, see if you have another jar of marinara, and if you don't, either you have to do without or you have to go out and buy another one. All of those things combined, those negative consequences of dropping the jar, are going to help you get better at remembering to be more careful next time not to drop the jar. So it's an effective punishment or discipline, but it's not really a punishment, it's just the consequence. Same thing. When we do something wrong, there is dirtying, there is damage that happens, and the process of repair and cleansing is unpleasant, which means it is also an effective punishment. But it's not there as a punishment first and foremost. It's not Hashem administering a punishment. It's just the natural consequence, the natural outcome. And the same thing to a large degree is also true of midah keneged midah. It's both. Yes, when we behave a certain way, we earn that Hashem should respond to us in an equivalent way. That being said, when we behave in a certain way, there are outcomes of that. Our behaviors make a difference. There are physical outcomes of our behaviors, of everything we think, say, and do. And there are non-physical outcomes of our behavior, of everything we think, say, and do. And those the same way that the physical outcomes have ramifications and start a chain reaction and have downstream effects, the non-physical outcomes also have ramifications and downstream effects and start a chain reaction. And everything spreads and continues, and whatever we put out into the universe sends back to us. Why? Because we did something that started a process, and that process ultimately, the chain of natural consequences is going to end up coming back to us in a way that makes sense and is proportional and equivalent and appropriate to what we did, because it's just the outcome of the chain that we started. And it may seem disconnected and like it's Hashem doing something to us because we don't feel like we did it to ourselves. But to a large degree, we did, because we started a chain reaction. It's just that maybe most of that chain was non-physical and it went up into the realms of non-physical and then made its way back down. But ultimately, we are getting back something that is appropriate and fair and proportional based on what we put out, which effectively is going to be an effective reward or punishment to a degree. But it's also just what we've done. And that's because the things we do make a difference. The things we do have natural outcomes and they make sense and they're consistent, right? I don't know, let's say, for example, you have a bunch of engineers that design a bridge and they all do all their work and they do the calculations and the materials and the angles and the structure and everything. And this bridge should be more, it's estimated to hold 3 times the amount of weight that's actually going to have to hold, and it's going to be fine. And, God forbid it collapses. And it collapses in a way that no one gets hurt. And then they come back and they're like, hang on a second, like no one could have predicted this. What went wrong, right? Now, let's say that happened 70 years ago. we've come a long way in engineering and in our understanding of physics and materials and forces, etc. It may well be that an engineer today would look back at something like that happened 7 years ago and say, well, obviously, like, duh, any engineer should have known that was going to happen. Yet we say that now with our insight. Back then, they didn't have sufficient insight. So they thought, there's like, where did this come from? Why did this bridge collapse? It doesn't make sense. It should have withheld the load that it was carrying. What happened? So when they look at it, it's like, where did this come from? This doesn't make any sense. This came out of left field. Something's wrong. When someone who has more insight into the whole picture will say, well, you should have seen that coming, right? With the understanding that we have now, perhaps you may look back and say, well, I could tell you exactly where that came from and why. Like, a bridge doesn't collapse if it's strong enough to not collapse. If the bridge collapsed, that means there was a reason why it collapsed, whether it's the materials, the design, the structure, all of the above. It didn't collapse if it wasn't going to collapse. Something unexpected may have happened, but the bottom line is it didn't collapse without the forces adding up to lead to its collapse. We might not be aware of all of those forces, but if it collapsed, the forces combine to make it collapse. And it's the same thing. The things we do contribute towards and generate outcomes. And those outcomes are going to be consistent. The collapse of the bridge is an outcome of the combination of forces that were coming in all the directions, and the strength of the materials and the normal forces and everything else resulted in the bridge collapsing. So here, when Rashi says that Asher's daughters were beautiful and married Kohanim Gedolim, the marrying the Kohanim Gedolim is the midah keneged midah of them being beautiful people. It's an outcome. The question is, what's the causal pathway, right? How did we get from being a beautiful person to marrying Kohanim Gedolim? Why is that the natural outcome? And really, it makes a lot of sense. If when we say beautiful people, we mean people who live lives that are people who, number one, have the right values up here, people who value Torah, mitzvahs, unity, making the world a better place through Torah, mitzvahs, etc. People who value those things, who value Hashem, who value the purpose of existence, and people for whom that is consistent and their behavior reflects those values. If that is someone that we would describe as a beautiful person, then think about what we're talking about. We're talking about someone whose life is all about doing the right thing, doing what they're supposed to do, helping someone when they're supposed to help someone, putting on tefillin when they're supposed to put on tefillin, lighting Shabbos candles when they're supposed to light Shabbos candles, learning Torah when they're supposed to learn Torah. Someone who lives their values and is a beautiful person, what they're putting out into the universe, let's say, right, the chain reaction that they're starting through their behavior is one of consistency with why we're here, consistency with Hashem's vision and plan, consistency with the purpose of existence, consistency with Torah, consistency with mitzvahs, which means that that pathway that is going to be generated through their life is going to be one that is going to be aligned with Hashem and Hashem's purpose and Torah and mitzvahs, Hashem's vision, the purpose of existence, which means that it is going to make sense that the natural outcome of that is going to be that their lives are going to be aligned with and in proximity and close to Hashem and Torah and mitzvahs and the purpose of existence and Hashem's vision. Now, if we think about the things that are unique about the Kohen Gadol, what's so special about the Kohen Gadol? What was different about the Kohen Gadol than all the other Kohanim? Aside from the fact that his uniform was an 8-piece outfit instead of a 4-piece outfit. Bingo. On Yom Kippur, he went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, into the Holy of Holies, whether it was in the Mishkan, in the Beis HaMikdash. And that was a place that no one else went. And even he went only once a year. What's in the Kodesh HaKadoshim? There's the Aron, the Luchos. What are the Luchos? Right, the Luchos are the 2 tablets, is the translation. What was on the Luchos? The 10 Commandments. How were the 10 Commandments on the Luchos? Were they written? With what? They were engraved. Sorry?
The second one were engraved, the first one was done by the person.
It was also engraved.
Well,
I mean, the structure was engraved, even if it hadn't been physically engraved by a person, right? Now, let's talk about the difference between something that's written versus something that's engraved, right? You know, if back in the days when everybody printed on inkjet printers, if this was printed on an inkjet printer, you would rub your hand over it, you could actually feel the ink, right? You would feel the three-dimensional, the height of the ink above the page. It was thin, but it was enough that you could feel it. Now, generally, anything that's printed on a laser printer, you're not going to feel it. And that's because the toner, right? If you take toner from an inkjet printer is liquid, it can get very messy. Toner from a laser printer is actually powder, and it can get also very messy and get everywhere. It's a dry powder. And what happens is the paper is actually burnt and bonded onto the page. So the ink, something printed by a laser printer might not be three-dimensionally above or separate from the page, but the bottom line is the words are not constructed out of the page. The words are constructed out of the ink that has been bonded to the page. There are two things here. There's paper and there's ink. The letters are not formed by the page. The page is a universal flat surface that lies beneath all the text. And then the ink is bonded onto that page and the ink makes up the letters. When something is engraved in stone, let's say you have a stone tablet and you engrave a word, a letter onto that stone, the shape of the letter is made out of the stone. There is nothing other than the stone. Right? Or you could say, well, the letter's not actually in the stone, it's in the empties, it's in the negative space that was engraved out of the stone. Fine. What defines the shape of the negative space? The perimeter of the stone. The shape of the stone defines the shape of the negative space. Right? You don't, if you want to engrave something in a stone, you don't create negative space by introducing negative space. You create the negative space by altering the shape of the stone. And the result is there is negative space as a result of the shape of the stone. So the words, letters that are engraved are, the letters are the stone. The shape of the letters is determined by the shape of the stone. The letters are composed by the stone and made out of the stone. There is no stone and then letters on the stone. The letters are part of the stone. The stone is the medium out of which the letters are made. And this represents something extremely important. And this really represents the beauty that we're talking about. Right? Because let's take it a step further. You know, you might say about someone, they're a beautiful person. You know, just they're a good person, a nice person, a caring person. Let's say specifically in the context of, you know, going a bit deeper into mitzvahs and purpose of existence and Hashem, etc. You say this person's like a really beautiful person in terms of, you know, someone who lives a life according to Torah and mitzvahs and Hashem's vision, etc. And then you'll have someone who's like beyond that. What could possibly be beyond that? What could be beyond perfect behavior, doing everything right? What could be beyond that is when there's someone, and when you look at them, you don't see a person who's learning Torah and a person who's doing mitzvahs and a person who's being nice and doing those things. You see someone that when you look at them, this is who they are. It's not what they do. This person is Torah. This person is mitzvahs. This person that they are, their life is defined by their headspace, their experience, their perspective is defined by Hashem's vision and why we're here and the purpose of existence and Torah and mitzvahs. And if a person, right, and that is the equivalent, right, of, you could have a person who does everything right, they're the person, and they do all the right things. That's like being a paper, and then the words of Torah are printed on you. Now, they might be connected, they might not be sticking out, they might be flat and level, but the bottom line is there's still paper and then there's ink. The letters are made out of the ink, not out of the paper. Our behavior is things that we do, it's not who we are. That's what's represented by writing on a page, on a medium. When the words are engraved in the medium, which is what the luchos were, That represents a person that this is who they are. You look at them and you're like, this person is amazing. They don't just behave a certain way, it's who they are. Right? They say about the Mittler Rebbe that, you know, figuratively, had he cut himself, Chassidus would have come out of his veins. Right? You know, sometimes you meet someone and they're just so special, and it's like the Torah and mitzvahs, goodness, is not what they do, it's who they are as a person. And if a person lives that way, if that is who they are and that's how they live their life, and that's the chain reaction that they are propagating and putting out, the things that follow along on that chain reaction are going to be things that are consistent with that depth of genuineness and authenticness, and not just doing, but being. And so it makes sense that if this is what Asher was known for, the tribe of Asher was known for, and Asher's daughters were beautiful people who were that genuine and real, that this is not just what they did, it's who they were, then it makes sense that they were going to merit to have offspring who would be Kohanim Gedolim, who did what? Who went into the Kodesh HaKadoshim, got to go, were the only person, one person a year, got to go in there and to actually be in the presence of the Aron, which had the luchos inside, which had the luchos, into which the Torah was engraved. It wasn't written. The letters and the words, the stone and the words were the same one thing. And when that's the way that someone is and that's the way that someone lives, it makes sense that that's something that's going to be in their future. That's something that's going to be that's going to show up in the path of outcomes and consequences, and that chain reaction that they propagate and start with living that way, because it makes sense, it's proportional and it's appropriate.
Don't understand one thing here. How can Asher produce Kohanim? They are not living
Daughters.
the daughters, but not
Because
also Kohanim Gedolim.
So
Did you say that they produced Kohanim Gedolim?
yes, the daughters.
And the daughters.
It says the daughters are beautiful and will, one it says married Kohanim Gedolim or will generate Kohanim Gedolim.
Oh.
Yes, correct. And really, right, this is something that's up to us. We don't have a choice, you know, we have a limited choice in terms of our personality and our character traits, and there are things that we can work on, but we're born with what we're born with. But at the end of the day, we all get to decide how we behave, and we can all work on taking those things one step at a time, making them more and more part of who we are, not just what we do, making them deeper, making them more real, making them more a part of who we are. And as we do that, as we become beautiful people, people who purpose and Hashem's vision and Torah and mitzvahs is who we are, we become people who are going to have Kohuna Gadol in our future, people who are going to have proximity to the luchos, to that unmatched sanctity and sacredness of the luchos, which have the Aseres Adibros, the 10 utterances actually engraved in them. And we earn that, and not just earn, we generate that by being someone that has Hashem's vision and purpose and Torah and mitzvahs engraved in who we are. And there's a sort of part 2 here, which goes back to tying this back to what a big part of the conversation earlier, because this is the tail end of the Sikha, was about Asher. It's a long conversation, but basically their connection with Kabbalah Soul. Now, we've talked about Kabbalah Soul before. Kabbalah Soul means an unconditional commitment to do what Hashem says, when Hashem says, how Hashem says. And for some reason, right, it says that Asher Yiratzoi is the, you know, the source of envy of all his brothers, the tribe of Asher. And one of the things it says, we got very specific, but one of the things it says a little bit more broadly is that Asher was blessed with offspring. Asher received an unparalleled blessing with offspring. Now, if you look at the numbers, Asher wasn't a outstandingly large tribe. So what does it mean that they were blessed with numbers? Again, the same thing. And that they were blessed with offspring, with children. Right? Hashem said to Avram Avinu, and I will make your offspring great. With one son, with Yitzhak. I was like, thank you very much. It's like, well, let's just stop and look at who Yitzhak was. Right? What's the blessing of offspring? The blessing of offspring is what they bring to life. And one child who brings more nachas than a dozen, even very good children, amazing children. But if you have one outstanding child who's bringing more nachas than a dozen amazing children, that is being blessed with children. That's having a credible nachas. So when it says that Asher was blessed with offspring, yes, they didn't have a larger number of children or offspring disproportionately than the other tribes, but they did have a blessing in terms of nachas, in terms of having these offspring who were beautiful and would generate kohanim gedolim, etc. Now, what's the connection? If this is something that the tribe of Asher got back from the universe, because what did they put out into the universe? This authenticness, and another part of that picture specifically is Kabbalah, is doing what they got to do. They were at the back of the camp and they cleaned up everybody's mess. They did what needed to be done. They got the job done. What's the connection between that and children and offspring? When Hashem came to give us the Torah, there was a lot of opposition to Hashem giving us the Torah, right? The Gemara talks about Moshe Rabbeinu went up onto Har Sinai, and there was thunder and lightning, and then, there was all of this behind the scenes that we didn't get to see. Everyone at the bottom of the mountain, thunder and lightning, and it was all dramatic. Moshe Rabbeinu went up and then, ascended into heaven, and he comes up to take the Torah, and then all these angels are like, who are you? What are you doing here? And he says, I came to get the Torah. And they say, who are you to get the Torah? And the Gemara talks about, they start shooting lightning bolts out of their eyes, and Moshe Rabbeinu was going to be vaporized. And Hashem, he's like freaking out. And Hashem says, just hold on to my seat, my kisei covered, my seat of glory, hold on to it, it'll protect you. So Moshe Rabbeinu holds on. And then the angels start, challenging him and saying, what makes you think you can take the Torah? And this and that. And Moshe Rabbeinu says to Hashem, well, what should I respond? And Hashem says, you want to take the Torah, you respond, figure it out. With all of these challenges, right, there was resistance to Hashem giving us the Torah. And one of the things that happened as part of this process is Hashem says, I'm giving you the Torah, the most beautiful and valuable thing that exists in all of the universes. What sort of security do I have? And, the Jewish people were offering this sort of security, that sort of security. Hashem was like, no, funny joke. You think that's proportional, right? Someone's going to loan you $1 billion. What are you going to say? Here, take my watch. I mean, maybe, but take my, $40 watch. Sorry?
Do you know a guy that wants to give you $1 billion?
No, I don't. That's the short answer. Right. But obviously you don't offer, I'll say, well, here's my 10-cent pen. You don't give a 10-cent pen as a guarantee to a $1,000 loan. It doesn't make sense. So there was nothing really that Hashem was accepting as the guarantee for the Torah until we said, B'neinu, our children, our offspring. The children are the foundation of the people. The people are built on the children. The people come from the children. The children are the foundation of everything. And so Hashem said, if you're going to offer me that as a guarantee, that I'll accept. So if the children are the foundation, it makes a lot of sense that having Kabbalah Soul, this unconditional commitment, will be rewarded, or the natural outcome and consequence of that will be a blessing in children. Because an unconditional commitment is also a foundation. Now, nobody wants to go through life with just an unconditional commitment. I will do what Hashem says, when Hashem says, how Hashem says. I will hate every second of it. I'm miserable. I wish I didn't have to do it. I don't enjoy this at all. I feel no excitement or passion or life, Hashem, but I know I've got to do it. I'm going to do it. First of all, if someone is in that situation and they do that, kudos to them. Kol hakavod. But, sorry?
There is communities like this.
I reserve my right to the Fifth Amendment. I'm going to withhold the comment. Yes. Short answer is yes, I agree. But we can all understand that that's not ideal, right? If someone doesn't have that passion and excitement and love and they do the right thing, I don't know that I could do that. Let me be honest. I know that I probably wouldn't. That being said, yes, it's an amazing achievement, but no one's going to say that's the ideal. The ideal is to actually enjoy and love Hashem and Torah and mitzvahs, and to feel a passion and excitement and involvement, and to actually appreciate its value. And because we appreciate its value, to have a relationship with it and a connection with it and energy in it, etc. That being said, one does not get ever to say, I don't need to worry, I don't need to have an unconditional commitment. I love Torah and mitzvahs so much, I don't need that commitment because I'll do it anyway. That becomes very, very dangerous. Because you know what? We all wake up on the wrong side of the bed sometimes. Even if hypothetically we never do, we could have. Which means that the Kabbalas, or the unconditional commitment, must always be there. Why? As the foundation. It's the foundation that everything stands on. Now, if you see a nice piece of land and it's available, maybe you buy it, maybe someone gives you a gift and you say, oh, there's a nice piece of land, come, let me build a big house, and you build this big, huge house on that land, and the land is what? It's dirt. And then over time, the house starts to sink, and it sinks a little faster on this side than that side, and then some rain comes and then starts to get a bit wobbly, and then eventually the whole house cracks and collapses. That happens, which is why before a building is built, there is usually a foundation that's laid, right? They dig deep in the ground and they pour massive volumes of cement, and there might be, steel beams and who knows whatever going in there. And that foundation there, who's interested in a foundation? Nobody. Did anybody ever say, I got a piece of land, let me build a foundation? Amazing, I built a foundation. Sweet, that was so good. Walk away. No one's interested in a foundation. Everybody wants a beautiful house. That being said, if you want to have a beautiful house and you want it to last, you should build a foundation first. Why? Because the foundation is necessary in order for the house to be stable. Nobody wants to just have Kabbalah soul all the time. Just like no one wants to just have a foundation. Everybody wants to feel involved and to feel and appreciate the value of Hashem and of Torah and mitzvahs and the beauty, and to be excited and passionate about it, and to love Hashem and to love Torah and mitzvahs, etc. And that excitement and passion and personal involvement is the house. That's a beautiful house. And as long as you look at the house, you can forget that the foundation is there beneath the surface, because while the house is standing, you don't need to really think about a foundation. It's if there hadn't been a foundation, you would have realized, whoops, right? Or if something goes wrong in the foundation, then people will start to see damage and go, oh my goodness, we need to get some engineers in and figure out what's wrong with the foundation. As long as the house is fine, no one's thinking about the foundation, because no one cares about the foundation other than the fact that it will keep the house in shape. Same thing, if someone is in a state of loving Hashem and loving Torah and mitzvahs and appreciating and being passionately excited and involved, it's true that in that moment, Kabbalah soul, they have to worry about their commitment because they're doing it anyway. The commitment's not relevant right now. But that commitment must always be there behind the scenes as the foundation to keep everything stable. So that if we wake up on the wrong side of the bed, if we have a bad moment, if something comes along and we're just not feeling it, the foundation is there and it will hold the house up, and that will make sure that even in those moments we do what we need to do. And so the same way that the foundation is what the house is built on, and Kabbalah soul is what our connection with Hashem is built on. It's not what it's made out of, right? The nation is not made out of the children. It's made out of all the people. The house is not made out of the foundation. It's made out of the bricks and all the other things that it's made out of. But the house is standing on the top of the foundation, on the back of the foundation. And the people are standing on the top and the backs of the children. We are here because of the children. Partly because we were those children once, and that's how we became the people we are. Partly because of the beauty and the purity of the children that maintain us as a people. And so that unwavering, the unconditional commitment, the Kabbalah soul, is very much the direct equivalent of the children. They are both the foundation that holds up the house or the nation. Kabbalah Sol is the foundation that holds up our connection and relationship with Hashem and Torah mitzvahs, and the children are the foundation that holds up the people. So it makes sense that Osher, that had this special, unique Kabbalah Sol unconditional commitment to do what needed to be done no matter what, that as that, had consequences and outcomes, that it makes sense that that would play out in and result in them having a special blessing in their children and in their nachas, because they are direct equivalents. It also makes sense we could look at it as a reward, that Hashem is going to reward that and repay it with the equivalent in their personal experience. The equivalent in their experience as a people is the children. So it makes sense if that's the equivalent of the Kabbalah Sol, both of the foundations, Hashem is going to repay us being committed to the foundation of our service to Hashem. Hashem will repay us with the blessing in the foundation of us as a people, which is in the children.
What was the work of Hashem in the
Sorry?
What was the job of Hashem in the
In the desert, in the camp, they traveled at the back.